the recording is always just me being like, and that is the easiest way to not get to your goals, you know? Like you literally need to petrify yourself into doing the thing. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Rich Artist Fridays. My name is Sophie. Hello to everybody in the Instagram live. Sorry for the little bit of a delay in saying hi. I always do this. I start my live and then I'm like fidgeting with things and the recording is always just me being like, and hi to everybody that's in here that got a ticket on Eventbrite. It's really good to see your guys' faces in here too. I love it when you guys join me on here and we get a little bit FaceTime. Yes, welcome back to our Fridays. Fridays are our 30-minute quickies where we just, I don't know, do story times of like crazy experiences when I was an intern, or just like little snippets that have really, really helped me in my business, little tips and tricks, and sort of, you know, as much information as I can possibly convey to you guys that I think would be really helpful to you, whether you are a full-time freelance photographer, or maybe you're working towards getting your first big commercial job, or you want to know how to reach out to brands so that they notice you, or you want to know how to grow a following on social media, how to build a community of people that are interested in your art, or having an exchange about maybe some of the messaging in your photography. Whatever it is, I have probably been there. I've probably made a lot of mistakes that I'd like to prevent you guys from having to make. I want you guys to learn from my experiences. I want you guys to have a person that you feel like you can come to when you feel like you have to do it all by yourself. You have to figure it all out by yourself. Maybe also sometimes in those moments where you feel overwhelmed by it, or you creatively burn yourself out of energy, because I know firsthand what it takes to run a successful business on the back end side of things. And from my personal experience, nobody ever taught me how to do that. Nobody ever took me to the side and was like, okay, Sophie, you need to master how to do these things in order to then have the mental capacity to stay creative and have fun in what I do. And that balance was A, hard for me to strike in the beginning, and B, like I had to hire my own business coaches and you know, shadow other photographers and assist other photographers and manage their studios and you know, watch their every move to try and decipher how they did it. And at the same time, I was also met with a lot of gatekeeping especially in the fashion and beauty industry, where I find it's very, very hard for the people that are very, very successful to get to that point, right? And they deserve all the accolades and all of the applause and admiration for that. But I have come across a lot of people that then in return, I guess, feel like if they sort of give you a leg up, you could somehow have it easier than they once did, or maybe you would be coming for their job, or maybe, you know, there's not enough space for everybody at the top, which is a very exhausting mentality to be confronted with when you're just trying to find a footing and make a living off of your art. And in my opinion, it's a little bit of an outdated mentality as well, you know, where I really don't see it like that anymore. You know, the need for content these days is greater than it has ever been before. And I truly, truly believe that all of you guys that do have a dream of working with brands or working with high-end private clients, or whatever it is you envision your career to look like, that there's a possibility there for you. And I want to help you guys clear that path for you to get there, because I think your art is super, super important. I think the social messaging that I see incorporated in a lot of your guys' art is immensely valuable and irreplaceable. And I wish more artists knew how to strike a balance between being an entrepreneur, being a freelancer, and being creative, because it really does take both. And I have assisted photographers that rake in millions a year. And one thing that I can say that I learned about them is that they were very, very smart business people. So I want to empower you guys to do that for yourself, because you deserve to, and I know that you can. But I know that sometimes it takes more than just one person to figure that out. It definitely did for me. So that's what the idea is here as well, is that we also have a little bit of community to see that, like, my God, us as freelance artists, we're in the same boat 99% of the time, and competition is really the last of our worries. Okay. So that's a long-winded sort of intro to anybody that might be new in here. And the Rich Artist Fridays are for me to just give you all I got, because there's so much of it. And if you ever miss a Rich Artist Friday, the recordings always go up on YouTube. So you can watch it there and tell other people if there's a topic that we talked about or a story time that you found especially entertaining, that they can go watch it there as well. And today I sort of want to continue this sort of new way that we've been doing content recently, which is like a part-time story time, and just sort of like learn from my experiences, or, you know, get little takeaways from things that happened in the progression of my career. And one really crucial moment for that was when I transitioned from assisting into photography. Now, I know not all of you might be assistants, but maybe you're in a full-time job, or maybe you have a part-time job and your dream is that photography becomes your full-time career. I think this applies to you as well. And when I hit that moment in my life where I was like, this no longer serves me in the way that it has up until this point, assisting in this case, and knowing what I was here to do, what I really wanted, and where I wanted to end up, and knowing that I had to make a transition, I had to leave the place that I was in order to get to the next place. Terrifying, petrifying, you know, that was a hard moment. And I know for everybody it is. Let me just see what you guys are saying in the live. Hi for everybody that's watching. And I know, obviously, with assistants, that is a huge thing, because most photo assistants, they want to be their own photographers at the end of the day. However, not everybody somehow seems to manage to make that transition. I really don't think that it is something that is like necessarily hard to do, but I know that it is scary and intimidating and very much uncomfortable in the moment for a lot of people. But I sort of wanted to talk about it today, to sort of take this idea out of, like, that it's incredibly hard to do. I come across so many people that I feel like they think to be a freelance artist is you have to sort of already be famous or have a big following, or be at the top of your game. And I meet so many people that are always like, I'm not ready yet, my work isn't ready. And I think that in and of itself is one of the biggest hindrances that people have. I'm not ready, it's not good enough yet, is honestly an excuse. And I know we're all perfectionists, which is what makes us unique artists and makes us good at what we do, because we get so obsessed with getting good at what we love, right? But perfectionism is just a cover-up for fear. And it tricks you into thinking that if only you perfect things enough, or you have more qualifications or more skills to show for yourself, or more experience, which, like, how are you going to get experience if you're not experiencing the thing? Like, then somehow you're protected from being judged for trying something and potentially failing, or letting others watch you try something that is out of your comfort zone that you don't yet know how to do. And that is the easiest way to not get to your goals, you know? So I think, as like a first disclaimer here, I just wanted to say that yes, it's uncomfortable to transition from one routine into another, or from one life situation into another. Something that has always helped me when I needed to make bigger decisions like that was sort of flip that on its head, and rather than only looking at the towards motivation, because we're all sitting over here being like, I want this so bad, it's my life dream, I want to dedicate my life to this, like, this is the most important thing to me. When I do my coaching consultations with my one-on-one clients that want me to hands-on help them steer their career in the direction that they wanted to go in photography, I ask them, what would it mean if you don't reach this goal? If you sit yourself down and you think about 1 year from today, 3 years from today, 10 years from today, if you hold on to this like fear or this comfort zone of yours, what is it going to cost you down the line? And that reality needs to be so scary that leaving a comfort zone now or trying something new becomes less scary. Like you literally need to petrify yourself into doing the thing. And the way that I transitioned from assisting to photography was I moved to New York City after having interned here and then getting my degree in photography. And then I worked my way up from like the third assistant, second, first assistant. I was digiteching for a little bit, and I had accumulated a handful of photographers who I had become sort of their first assistant. So whenever they would do a shoot, I got booked on that. So my paycheck, all of the money that I was earning was coming in from day jobs. And so I was living paycheck to paycheck, and you can have sort of a stable life and a stable income from assisting if you have enough go-to photographers that trust you and that will continuously throw you work. As long as they're working, you're working, you know? And that was a great position to be in because I got to learn the ins and outs of what they did and what I wanted to do one day. Now, while I was assisting, I was doing a crap ton of photo shoots by myself. Obviously, you have to build a portfolio, no matter if you're in a full-time employee position, you have a completely different career, you have a different job, or you're assisting. If you want to be a photographer, you're gonna have to take photos. However, when it comes to earning money with your photography, for me, I hit this point where I had been assisting for maybe, I keep forgetting, it must have been like 2 years. So I had 6-month internship, which was like the basics of all of the stuff and sort of fly on the wall. And then 2 years of working my way up that ladder of like different assisting positions. And I reached this point where I felt like I had sort of mastered most of the aspects of the job, but I wasn't an expert. I wasn't a professional assistant. And I had a bunch of professional assistants in the industry. We call them lifers. So these are people that have been assisting for like 10 plus years, and they are absolutely incredible at their job. They are so insanely knowledgeable about equipment and how to set light and any sort of digital equipment, any sort of cameras that a photographer might want to work with. These people are real experts and professionals in. But most of these assistants once also had the dream of being a photographer. And yet somehow they got stuck in that comfort zone of like having consistent work being thrown their way and having gotten really good at it. If you get really good at this job, you can make decent money off of this. However, I think a lot of these assistants had sort of crossed this point where now would have been the time for them to make the jump. Or I watched some digitechs, for example, they had, saved up a little bit of money, and then they were like, okay, I'm going to go cold turkey. I'm going to tell all of my photographers I am no longer digiteching, I am no longer assisting. And then they just sort of stopped that line of work, but they haven't been shooting in forever because all they were doing was assisting. And then all of a sudden they're like, okay, if I can only, focus more on it and dedicate all of my time towards now being a photographer, this career will somehow magically emerge. And that is something that I found to be risky. And those assistants, I saw a lot of them sort of come back after a couple of months after having burned through their savings, being like, I need to start assisting again, because I mean, we're also talking about New York City here, like the most expensive city in the entire world to live in. But so I was looking at that, and there was this sort of like consensus amongst all assistants that like, oh, they tried to make the jump, oh, they failed, here they come crawling back. And that honestly is such bullshit. Like that is such kindergarten mentality of this, like, oh, they tried, they thought they were good enough, turns out they're not. Like, are you kidding? Like, we all have the same dream here, right? What made me want to start transitioning, I remember at the time I was digiteching and like a first assistant for a handful of photographers, and I had started to model, which weirdly enough was starting to bring in like a good chunk of my income as well. And I was modeling for a very well-known photographer here in New York City. And I look up to him. I admire his work. He does a lot of like portraiture of celebrities and makes a really decent living with that, has a really large studio space that is all his own, like an absolute dream here in New York City. And I was in front of his camera and he was like asking me about myself, and I was like, oh, I'm a digitech, but like I'm a photographer. And he looked at some of my work and he was like, the way that people summarize you in 2 sentences under whichever context they meet you will be where people will perpetually keep putting you. Because anybody that you work with in the industry, it is the easiest and the most convenient for them to keep you exactly where they know how to utilize you. So if somebody meets you as an assistant, or if somebody meets you as the accountant that also does photography on the side, that's who you will be in their memory. And this is not just, you know, the clients that you're on set with that are meeting you as the assistant of the photographer that they've hired. This is every single person that you interact with within that job position. So if you want to start to get hired and get paid for your photography, most people that hear about you, and a lot of this in the industry, if you're already in the industry, is word to mouth. Nobody's going to hire that assistant that also does photography. All assistants do photography on the side. They might hire somebody that's like, oh, they're a model and a photographer because they're both lead role positions on set. There's a bunch of models that have made that jump from photographer to model, or vice versa. I wish there was more, because honestly, it makes you a great photographer to like experience that position, because it's fucking petrifying. But it sort of clicked for me where I was like, oh, I am interacting with hundreds of other people within this industry in the position as an assistant day in, day out. And that's who I am to them. So unless I put my foot down and I say, I am no longer available for this job position, I am a photographer, this is what, like, who I am here to be hired as, it's just not going to happen, you know? And easier said than done, obviously. Like, okay, Sophie, great, you realized like you needed to do something different, but like what do you do from that point onward, right? So realistically, what I did was I had that conversation with that photographer and I was like, damn it, he's right. He's so right. And I knew that I had gotten to the point in all of my assisting positions where I had taken the best learning opportunities out of those positions that I needed in order to be the best photographer that I could be. And I have come across so many assistants that will be like, oh, you need to be somebody's first assistant for at least 3 years. You need to have been assisting for at least 5 years or 10 years or whatever to sort of like earn your position in the industry, or like, you know, pay your dues to the industry, which you don't owe anybody anything. So, you know, first of all, but this advice was always coming from the people that were 10 plus years into assisting, that were so burnt out creatively that they hadn't touched a camera in months. And I knew that if I stayed in an assisting position for much longer, I would get to that point too, because it's long hours, it's hard physical labor. And I had gotten comfortable and good enough in those positions where I could sort of do it with ease, you know, having acquired enough knowledge where I could just sort of show up and do the job. But I wasn't there to just show up and do an assistant job. I moved to New York City in order to follow my dreams and become a freelance photographer. So a lot of steps along that way were extremely uncomfortable and extremely scary. I moved to the United States without even having a job lined up, guys. So whenever those moments come, I think it's almost like you're squeezing through a keyhole, and that pressure is what it takes to sort of fester something new, or come up with something new. And in the first place, obviously it takes self-trust, and maybe also a little bit of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Just being smart about it, being clever, being street smart, sort of being crafty with it. And what I did was I knew that the minute that I told the photographers whose go-to I had become, I am no longer assisting, those jobs would start going to somebody else, because there's always more people lined up that are just as good at assisting. And what's the most important to photographers is that they have somebody that they know will be available and that they can rely on, and not just once, but many, many times as jobs come in. Obviously that like roster switches up a little bit because we're all freelancers, but that's what photographers need. And a photographer understands that most of their assistants are eventually going to venture into being photographers themselves, and they're going to take a lot of the stuff that they learned on their sets and run with it, which is fine. Like, they deserve to. But they won't ask you again, you know? They'll start finding a replacement for you. And so that was a big decision, because I knew that the minute that I told them, like, I'm not your person anymore, like, I was literally saying goodbye to a whole career in and of itself, like a whole, like, I was earning all of my money from this besides modeling. So what I did was I started doing commercial retouching behind the scenes. The retoucher that I work with, she's like the best of the best. She does amazing campaigns like MAC Cosmetics and House Labs and Savage X Fenty, and like really, really big campaigns. And I have never been classically trained as a retoucher, but I have been retouching since I was 12. And I retouch all of my own work, and she knows me pretty well. And I went to her and I asked her, like, do you think I'm good enough to be like of assistance to you? So what I did for a while in that transition period was she would take on more jobs than she could handle, like quantity wise, on her own. And I would sort of be the second hand behind the scenes that would do a lot of the fiddly work. So she would do like the color grading and like all of the stuff that she was like schooled in, like she went to school for. And I would do more of the legwork of like, you know, the stuff that's just like, you don't need that much technical knowledge for it. And like, I have a lot of technical knowledge in post-production, but like not at her level. Like, I'm not going to color grade a Nike campaign yet. And so I did that, and retouching is amazing money, you know, for campaigns in this industry, from secondary to primary images. Sometimes you can charge from like $250 to like $1,000 an image. So split that up between two people, do like 10 images or something, boom, you've got your monthly expenses covered, which is great. And what was really, really helpful for me was that I got to do it behind the scenes without ever really putting my name to it either. Because I wanted to start showing up as a photographer, and it was really important for me to do that. So having something that I could do on the side, sort of, you know, not be visible as an assistant anymore, have consistent income, and be able to show up consistently as the photographer that I wanted to start getting hired as, was golden. And I'm trying to remember, I'm pretty sure that as I was assisting, I was doing smaller shoots that I was getting paid for, like test shoots, for example, for modeling agencies. If you guys are a fashion or beauty photographer, start building relationships with model agencies, because that can be a lot of consistent work. It's smaller jobs, like models don't have a lot of money to spend on their portfolios, but all of the models that do want to be professionally working, especially in the beginning of their career, will be investing money in their portfolios. So no matter what position you're in, I'd say start trying to reach for low-hanging fruit in the photo industry and make room for that in your life. And be smart about this transition. Don't go cold turkey, burn through all your savings, and that be the first time in your life where you dedicate like mental capacity to what it's like to work as a freelance photographer. You can do that, and it might work for some people. Like, maybe you are the kind of person that just needs to have so insanely much pressure of like, there is no going back, this has to work out for me, like I'm gonna sit myself down for 2 months and write 100 emails a day. Like, by all means, like, you have my blessing. But that's not sort of how that transition went for me. I'm trying to think, like, I want to give you guys the best tips that I have here, but really, this is what it looked like for me. This is what I've observed from other people doing this transition. Let's see. I'd love to hear a little bit of feedback from you guys if you have any questions about this. Also, if you guys are in here in the Instagram live, like, Have you tried to make that transition? Are you thinking about making that transition? What sort of position are you currently in? And maybe like, what are some doubts that come up for you, or what are some difficulties that you're running up against when you think about like where you want to go with your photography career versus where you're currently standing, which I think is always really interesting. You know, like it's great to have that vision, but then it's also great to be realistic of like, okay, where is that discrepancy? Like, where am I at? What do I need? What is in between from here to here? Like, what is along that path? And you guys can either unmute yourself or like write a comment in the comment section. Let's see. And in the meantime, I'm just gonna think. I want to be as helpful as possible here. Obviously, you know, if you want to be a photographer, you have to be doing photography. You have to be shooting. If not just in order to have a portfolio to present to people when you're asking them for work. It's all very helpful. I think that taking the leap is always scary, but I appreciate you giving some examples of how to stay afloat financially while striving for success. Absolutely. Maybe another thing to say here is that I know that a lot of us photographers have a pretty big ego about being artists and about our art. And I'm not saying this in a negative context. I think it's absolutely crucial to be proud of your work and to be confident in your capabilities and to sort of identify yourself with what you do. Yet, I mean, I know personally that certain things that I had to do along the way of chasing my dreams were so outside of what I ever pictured I would have to do or I would encounter along that path that really tickled my ego. That definitely, like, it wasn't a question of like, do I have the skills to do this? It was more of like, do I think I'm too good for this? And I think a lot of us have this. So, and it's perfectly fine. It's perfectly natural. And I say this all the time. And like, we did a whole thing about a photographer's ego. That recording is on my YouTube. It was a fun one. I recommend you check it out. But when you look at the photographers that you idolize, that you want to be like them one day, or you think if I had the career that they have, I would be living my dream life. You only see the accolades that they have acquired over probably an insane amount of years of progression within that career. I compare myself to photographers that have like 20, 30 years on me in the industry all the freaking time, which is not good for my mental health, let me tell you. But I don't see 99% of the steps that they had to take to get there. And trust me, I promise you, it is never glamorous. And I used to think like, oh, there's certain types of jobs that I'm not allowed to take just because I need to pay my rent, or there's a certain type of work that I shouldn't have to be doing. If only I were a good enough photographer, I wouldn't have to stoop to this level, or I wouldn't have to like try out something new publicly and make a fool of myself, or have people potentially judge me for like trying something in order to make a living and make my dream career happen. Best example is my coaching business. I always in my entire life have loved teaching, and I've always had this dream of building a community of artists that are all sort of in the same boat of trying to make this very unique type of career happen for themselves, myself included. And when I was starting out in trying to invest in my career and making something happen for myself, I felt like I was completely by myself and that I had to figure it out every step of the way. And I wish there would have been people that I could have been like, how the hell do we overcome this struggle? Whether it's a mental block, because if you're trying to make a career out of your artistry, who you are as a person is what your career is. That's just fact. But a lot of it is also tactics of like being smart about business, being smart about money making activities, being smart about outreach and all of these things. And I'm here to teach you guys that. But there was so many points in that progression. There still is, guys, every step of the way. There's things where I thought, I somehow thought that real success in this industry for me would somehow look more glamorous, would look more dignified. And this is my ego talking. Like, I hope you can hear this, you know, but we all have a certain vision in our head, and it's important that you are dead set on that vision, that you become as crystal clear about what you want as possible, but then also releasing the expectations of what it's going to take for you to get there. Because when at the end of the day, how badly do you want this, and what are you willing to do in order to get there? What is your bottom line? And you'll probably find that it's a lot lower than what you hoped it would have to be, and that is perfectly fine. Okay, so if you need to go out there and find a way to make money in whatever way possible, so that you can sort of free up a little bit of time to dedicate towards being a freelance photographer, and also dedicate towards that visual representation of you as a hireable photographer, which is important. People need to know that you're out there and that you're available to them, which is a whole other topic of like, how do you make people aware that you exist, right? It's important to wrap your mind around how visible you are to the potential clients that you dream of, but also free yourself from, if this is meant for you. And I know that for a lot of us artists, it is just such a non-negotiable, because it's who we are at our core. It's who we are at our heart, which is why I know that you guys can be successful at this. That also means that every step of the way, it's going to come along with things that will push you out of your comfort zone again and again, and that will sort of challenge your ego, will challenge your self view, your self perspective. And it's also okay to allow yourself to try things and recognize where your bottom line is, where you're truly outside of your comfort zone, where it doesn't feel like something that you just need to get used to. It feels like something that's not a fit for you. And guess what? Those are probably the best experiences to make, because once you've made them, you know exactly what direction you're now going to steer away from. And that is just as important. I hope that helps you guys. I hope that gives you guys a little bit of encouragement to take that next step, whatever it is for you. Maybe think about it today. Like, what is the one thing that you know is maybe something that your ego is keeping you from doing, or that is just so outside of your comfort zone? Trust me, once you make that step, just because it feels out of your comfort zone doesn't mean that it feels wrong. And the more you make those experiences, the more you'll recognize that. I have to remind myself of that every step of the way of things that I do. So I hope that helps you guys. It was really nice seeing your faces in here. Hello to everybody that is in here for the first time. It's very nice to meet you guys. And come back next Friday. Check out my Eventbrite, where I pre-program these courses. And if you're at a place in your career where you want some hands-on one-on-one input, hit me up. My coaching consultations are for free for one-on-one coachings that I do with my clients. And it's really the fastest way to get to the next goal that you might have, because then I can really, tackle your problems and your hurdles where you are at, and teach you exactly what, like, the resources and the tactics that will make the biggest difference for you right away. But besides that, keep an eye out for some workshops that we do, where we cover more general things that have been sort of the foundation in me building my career, that I think are important for any freelance photographer as well. Jonathan says, thank you for doing this. Really cool to hear your story. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Yeah, and thanks for saying hi. And I will see you guys next week. Bye, guys.